Hello everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today. I appreciate your presence and I hope everyone's safe and keeping well. I'm Meenakshi Sundaram, one of the product marketers for Zoho Vault. I'll be running you through today's session, and you can post your questions at any point in this webinar like I earlier mentioned, and I'll be answering them all at the end of this session, or our technical support engineer Christopher will pick those questions up for you right when you post them during the session. So thank you so much for joining me in the session, Christopher.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so as Meenakshi already mentioned in email notification, it's all about the passwordless authentication. So if you have any questions, you can always post this on the question section in the tool, or you can, wait and have your questions at the end of the session. Thanks once again for joining this.
Thank you, Christopher. All right, so let's quickly get started. So we'll start off the session with a brief introduction on why passwords are a major cause for concern in this modern world and why businesses should stay vigilant and not take the password-based threats lightly. And this will be a good lead to the next part of our session where we'll talk about the necessity for passwordless authentication and why businesses need to go passwordless for various reasons. And we'll then wrap up the session with a brief introduction to managing passwordless authentication with Zoho Vault, post which I'll be taking up a lot of your questions. But yeah, you can still feel free to post all your questions as and when you get them. You can use the questions section that you find in your Showtime panel. All right, let's get started. When you look at the screen, I think you're probably identifying with a lot of these things on your screen here. Like, we know for a fact that nearly every part of our lives are now online, right? Be it because of the technological developments or the easy access to the internet that we have these days. It's certain that we are a lot more dependent on the online world than ever before. Right from using a mobile application to order food, groceries, or even to get a cab, to all the smart appliances we use at our home, and almost every other device that's connected to the internet these days, we pretty much use we pretty much have a major chunk of our daily activities being managed online, right? It wasn't the case, let's say 2-3 decades ago, but right now we are so much dependent on the online world. And you probably already guessed it, like at least until a year or so ago we weren't so much dependent on these online applications for work. But now these recent times have been challenging for every individual and enterprise out there. Like, with the pandemic yet to die down, millions of people continue to work from their homes, and this has brought up new challenges for companies to deal with, right? For probably the first time ever, our personal lives and work lives have become closely entangled, and this has in turn given rise to the widespread adoption of remote work that we're seeing right now. So what this has done is that it has actually forced enterprises to adopt new applications to completely replicate the office experience or the environment at home for employees, and also come up with newer security policies to safeguard business data, right? And as a result, we're now forced to use more apps than ever before. So we at Zoho Vault recently conducted a customer survey, and over 200 respondents were asked about the number of applications they used on a weekly basis. I guess some of you might have taken up the survey as well. So what we found out was that over 73% of people stated that they used anywhere between 10 and 100 apps every single week at home and work, with almost 5% stating that they used over 100 applications every week. Now, these numbers are quite massive, right? So, what do these numbers mean? Is there anything here that should concern businesses? Like, okay, my employees use a lot of apps, so what's really the concern here, right? So, before I move on, let me take a quick poll here, and I wanted to see how many of you began your new year with a password reset. This is going to be a fun poll. So I want to know how many of you guys started your new year with a password reset. Like, think about the time you went on a vacation and returned back to your office and you were like, okay, do I remember my password? I mean, that's something that's happened a lot with many people, right? Just gonna give 10-15 more seconds for you guys to answer the poll. All right. So we have almost 27% of people. That's like almost 3 out of 10 people have forgotten their password and had to like reset their password when they return to work. That's okay. That's pretty much commonplace right now, right? I mean, it's not very okay, but that's how it is. So this is probably because we are inadvertently forced to manage an overwhelming number of passwords for personal and business needs, right? We have hundreds of passwords that we don't even recollect anymore. Sometimes even the most crucial passwords uh, don't stay with us in our memory. We're forced to hit the reset password button, or we're forced to reach out to the admin team and ask for a new password, right? Now, there's a bigger downside to all of this, apart from just forgetting a password. Like, you are forced to remember multiple passwords where you're not capable of doing so, right? It's simply challenging for any individual to remember multiple unique passwords. What this does is this indirectly promotes password fatigue across your organization, forcing employees to resort to unsafe password management techniques. It doesn't have to be just employees, it can be super admins, and everybody, right? We're all human at the end of this. So what we do is we resort to these types of password management techniques. So some of you might be forced to write down your passwords in pieces of paper, store them in unencrypted digital files, or even save these passwords in your browsers. An online survey conducted by Google in 2019 identified that almost 65% of people use the same password for multiple or all accounts. So password reuse is also a very major concern, because let's say you use one strong password across every account. Even if one of those accounts get breached, you are probably exposing all your accounts to you're exposing access to all of your accounts to attackers, right? Like, that's very commonplace right now. So these are what happen when you have an overwhelming number of passwords to manage, unless and until you're using a password manager, that is. Now, what makes this even worse is that passwords still cause over 80% of all data breaches in the hacking category. So, according to a recent research report from Verizon, attackers have found joy exploiting stolen or brute force credentials since the global lockdown was enforced in 2020. So, this is why it's probably finally probably finally the time for a change, right? Like, we know that there's a problem with passwords, and it's probably the time right now to act on it and get something that benefits your enterprise on the security front, right? So how do we fix this problem? Yes, the simple solution is to go passwordless. So Gartner, a renowned global research firm, urges businesses to adopt passwordless authentication as one of the top security projects this year. And they state that this will effectively help businesses migrate to a safer, less stressful means of authentication. Now, by 2022, Gartner also predict that 60% of large and global enterprises, as well as 90% of mid-sized enterprises, will implement passwordless methods, and this will be the case in almost more than 50% of people out there, which is up from almost 5% in 2018. So there's a drastic spike seen there, right? In just less than 4 years. So yeah, passwordless is definitely going to be the future. But what is passwordless authentication? So any form of authentication that allows users to log in without typing a password can be classified as passwordless authentication. Now, this can be achieved using one-time passwords, your hardware tokens, your authenticator apps, and or even your users' biometrics, which can effectively replace the role of passwords, right? So these are different means through which you can achieve passwordless authentication. Now, in addition to this, a key mechanism that businesses can adopt is passwordless single sign on, which works exceedingly well for enterprises that manage hundreds of applications. And this isn't something new for us. So we already live in a world that's powered by passwordless SSO. So almost all popular services provide access to their service using our active sessions from Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all other third-party services. Even Zoho has single sign-on implemented across our different applications, such that when you log in once with any of the Zoho applications like Mail, Desk, CRM, and so on, you will get easy access for any of the other Zoho applications. So this is something that Zoho One users might very well be familiar with, right? So yeah, it's not time to replicate this process across your enterprise by taking a look at how this process works. Now, how do you how do you go about doing this? So what happens in the background? So SSO services use protocols such as Kerberos and SAML to facilitate the exchange of user authentication and authorization data across secure domains. So SAML-based SSO services involve communications between the user, an identity provider that maintains a user directory, and a service provider. So when a user attempts to log into an application that's enabled with SSO directly from the service provider, let's say you try to log into Dropbox that has SSO enabled with an identity provider, say Google or even Facebook or even Vault for the matter. So if you can see on your screen, I've considered Vault to be the identity provider here. So let's say you're trying to log into Dropbox that has SSO enabled with Vault with an identity provider that's Vault. So what Vault or the identity provider does is that they'll just receive a SAML request, and once they receive the SAML request for authentication, the identity provider will then verify the authentication and send a SAML response to the service provider, who will then authenticate the user. So this is basically how it happens. So the user will not have to log in again and again for the rest of their session. And whenever users access a new domain or an application that requires authentication, they will be redirected to the identity provider. And since users are already logged in at the IDP, they will be redirected to the original domain with the necessary authentication token, which means you'll just have passwordless access, or you'll just avoid manual authentication altogether whenever you're accessing applications through SSO. So that was the authentication initiated by the service provider. Now we see about the authentication initiated by the identity provider. It's pretty much straightforward. Now users can log into the identity provider, say Zoho Vault, and then from Zoho Vault, if they try to access any application that's enabled with SSO, they can just directly access it. So yeah, by implementing SSO in your enterprise, you can efficiently grant restricted access to different individuals in your organization for whatever app you've configured and whatever app you deem necessary for them, and you can just help them eliminate manual authentication altogether. So what are the benefits? So we were just talking about implementing or how SSO works behind the scenes. So what are the benefits that you get? It's great that we eliminate passwords, right? So for starters, you'll significantly reduce the possibility of all password-based cyber threats. That's one. Then you'll improve your users' productivity by preventing unnecessary password reset requests, right? So this is why I asked you in the first place, how many of you began your year with a password reset? So you can avoid that particular step where you need a password reset request every time you forget a password. That's something that regularly hampers work for a lot of organizations, and it can also enhance the overall user experience. So a user wouldn't have to manually authenticate every time. They wouldn't have to enter their passwords again and again just because of a typo, and yeah, so on. So you can improve their overall experience, and you'll also be able to grant instant access to your users from anywhere in the world. So what this does is it helps you hire top talents from around the world, and you can just break the border barrier, or you can just let your employees work from wherever they wish to, and you can just hire the brightest minds, because you'll not have to constantly be in touch with an admin team for any reason whatsoever. And also you can promote the remote work culture within your organization even when everything goes back to normal, right? Because a recent survey from IBM stated that at least 54% of respondents wanted remote work to be their primary work mode. So yeah, so this is going to be a key factor that will, kind of give you the differential factor uh, to improve on your employee retention rate in the future. People are probably going to want to stay remote as well, and SSO is something that helps you simplify that process as well. Like that's going to be one of the factors that uh, simplifies remote work, right? And you'll also be able to track user access and stay audit ready. And enterprises can also save tons on their budget by going passwordless. So, passwords often come with multiple hidden costs that include the billable hours spent on password resets by customer support personnel and the hours an employee spends without access to a particular application, right? So Gartner states that almost 40% of all help desk requests are related to password reset. And Forrester reports that large enterprises spend up to $1 million on staffing and infrastructure just to manage these requests. So going passwordless can definitely save you a lot on your yearly budget. And also imagine the scenario where you hire a new employee and you just don't have to wait forever to grant them access to all these important systems, right? When you have SSO enabled, you can just get them access to all these accounts in just a few clicks, and they'll be ready to get started, or, or just go about doing their work from day one, right? So that's another factor that improves your organization's productivity. Finally, you'll be able to improve the password hygiene across your enterprise as well. Now, as much as we'd love a world where we're not dependent on passwords anymore, they're still going to be essential in certain places, right? You cannot ignore passwords altogether. You're still going to need to remember a few passwords, at least for the foreseeable future, right? So in those cases, whenever you adopt passwordless SSO, you'll be reducing the number of applications that your organization would need manual authentication for. Right? You can reduce the burden on your users by letting them remember only a select few passwords, which will help them, opt for safer passwords or stronger passwords uh, when in comparison to say hundreds of accounts that have to be managed by them. So that's another positive when it comes to SSO. You'll be improving the password hygiene across your organization so that they set strong passwords for the accounts that matter. All right, so this is not an exhaustive list, so it's just a quick overview of the different important benefits you can experience. So yeah, now's probably a really good time as any other to go passwordless, right? So how do you do that? How do you set up SSO, and how does Zoho Vault come into the picture? And that's what we'll be focusing on right now. So we'll be helping you set up passwordless SSO with Zoho Vault. Now, Vault allows you to set up SSO for an unlimited number of apps. It's a very simple process which involves a one-time configuration per application, right? So to help you get started, I'll just show you a quick example of how you can set up SSO with Vault as the identity provider. And for this example, I'll take Google Workspace, which was previously known as G Suite, as a service provider, and we'll be seeing that in the next few slides. All right, so before we begin, here are some prerequisites that you must be aware of. So you should be on Zoho Vault's Enterprise Edition. So if you're a Zoho One customer, you already have access to Zoho Vault's Enterprise Edition, so you should be good there. Otherwise, if you're using Vault as a standalone application, just ensure you are on the Enterprise Edition before you proceed. If you need to upgrade, you can always get help from our team as well, so no worries on that. So yeah, you should be on the Enterprise Edition, and if you aren't a super admin in Vault, you should probably reach out to your super admin and pass on these steps to them. So you wouldn't have to worry. We'll be linking various resources that you can make use of at the end of this session. We'll be sharing those links for you as well. So if you're a super admin in Zoho Vault, well and good. If you're not, no worries. We'll be giving you the resources that you need to pass on to your super admin. And yeah, and before configuring Zoho Vault as your identity provider, you should either download the metadata from your service provider. Service provider is any application you would like to set up SSO with, right? So you should either download the metadata from your service provider or get the service provider's assertion consumer URL and audience URI and so on. So these are certain details that you'll need before proceeding with setting up SSO. All right, so log into your Zoho Vault account as a super admin, and once you're done, just click Manage Apps under the Apps tab that you see to your left. So you'll just need to click the Apps tab, and then select Add Supported App or Create Custom App from the Manage Apps section. So the ad supported app will list you almost 100 plus popular apps that are instantly configurable. We have a predefined templates for these applications that will help you get done in within seconds. So you can either search for your apps from this particular section, or let's say if you can't find them, you can just switch to create custom app. You can just click on create custom app. That's very next to the ad supported app button, and that's it. So when you click create custom app, you would need to enter the application name, which is the name of the service provider, and then you'll need to upload the metadata that you downloaded from the service provider. You can get in touch with your service provider and download the metadata file, or if not, you can always manually copy the details that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, you can either upload the metadata from your service provider or click on the enter SP details manually option that you see at the top of your screen. So you'll be able to manually update those details from your service provider. And once you're done, just click next. And from here, you'll be able to download the Vault's metadata, or you can also again manually copy the login and logout URLs along with all the other certificate and IDP sure details from Vault and manually update it in your service provider. And we'll see how you can do that right now. All right, so since our example is Google Workspace, you can just log into your Google Workspace account as an admin. And once you're done, you can access the admin console and click on the search field. So you can search for single sign-on in the search field, and you'll find an option called Setup Single Sign-On with a third-party IDP. So click that option. Once you click that, you will be able to find the fields where you can either manually update Zoho Vault details, or you can even upload the metadata file that you downloaded from Zoho Vault in that particular screen. So yeah, once you're done, you just hit save, and now you switch back to your Zoho Vault account. And so uh, once you're done downloading the metadata file from Zoho Vault, click next, and you'll see the screen where you'll see the list of users for whom you'd be able to grant access for. So select the users and click grant access. That's pretty much it. Now, all users with access to the app will find Google Workspace under the My App section in their Zoho Vault account. Once they click the icon, they'll be able to launch Google Workspace, and they'll not be required to manually authenticate with Google Workspace. They'll automatically get access to that particular account. That's it. So it's as simple as that. All right, so we earlier spoke about the benefits that passwordless SSO would bring to any enterprise, right? But it's also important to note down the additional benefits of using a password management solution like Zoho Vault as your identity provider for SSO as well. So why Zoho Vault? Why should you opt for Vault? So the primary reason behind that is the fact that passwords won't be void, at least in the near future. So with passwordless SSO, you can significantly reduce the number of passwords managed at your enterprise. And with a password manager in place, you can manage the few critical passwords that you use, as well as manage all the SSO applications, eh, all from a single application. So you can just organize and streamline access to all your SSO based apps as well as password based applications under one roof, and you can eliminate the need to actually remember passwords. You can stop your employees from actually having to manually enter or remember passwords. They can generate strong unique passwords from Zoho Vault, and they'll also be able to share these passwords securely within your team or even across teams for that matter. And again, you'll be having enough options to track, monitor, as well as manage every user's access. You'll be able to monitor every user's actions, track their access, see at what time they've accessed a particular password or copied a password, and things like that. So you'll be able to get a clear picture of what's happening within your organization's vault clearly. And yeah, the most important point is that you get two benefits from one solution. You'll not have to purchase two different solutions. You'll get something. You'll get a tool that does two things for the price of one. So yeah, that's another reason why you should definitely try out Zoho Vault, because you would get maximum benefits out of it. So yeah, like I earlier mentioned, you have these useful resources that you can access and view as well. You can access a help document, or if you're very new to Zoho Vault, you can see what Zoho Vault does by viewing this product demo. Or if you're using one of the uh, lower editions of Zoho Vault and you feel like you'd want to upgrade to the enterprise edition and give passwordless authentication a go, you can just go ahead and check out our pricing and see how you can just upgrade your edition and bring in a lot more features to your organization that improves and bolsters your security altogether. Okay, so that was pretty much it. That was quite a bit from my side. So it's time for your questions. I guess you can go ahead and post all your questions. Delisa wants to know if Zoho Vault is a part of Zoho One. Yes, Delisa, Zoho Vault is a part of Zoho One. You already have access to Zoho Vault's Enterprise Edition. You can go ahead and try out uh, Vault Vault's Enterprise Edition from your Zoho One account. All right, Paul. It's not a necessity that users would have to launch this particular third-party application from Zoho Vault every time. Like I earlier mentioned, users can either launch the application after authenticating with Zoho Vault, or they can even initiate the authentication from the service provider as well. So they can even authenticate from the third-party apps. I mean, they can go to the third-party website, and from there they can initiate the login, because they'll be redirected to Zoho Vault's authentication system. Once they're done authenticating there, only then they'll be uh, able to log in. So it does not necessarily mean your user should always launch apps from Zoho Vault's console. They can always access these apps uh, directly as well. They'll just be redirected uh, to complete their authentication with the IDP, which will be Zoho Vault. And yeah, it also means that they would not have to authenticate with Vault every time they access a new app. Let's say you have configured SSO with Dropbox as well as Google Workspace. So once you authenticate with Vault to access Dropbox, you'll not have to separately authenticate with Vault again to access your Google Workspace account. It's just a one-time thing, as long as your session's valid. Yeah. Yes, Paul, that's the whole point of it. You wouldn't have to create an individual account for every user. You can just grant them access to a particular application without revealing the username or password to your users. Yeah, Richard, we already have methods in place where users can unlock their vault in mobile devices using the fingerprint on Android devices, as well as using the Touch ID on your iOS devices. So this is something that we already use. Right now, we're also checking on the possibility of getting a desktop app for different OSs. So we're also exploring the possibilities of including fingerprint authentication for our desktop apps as well. But again, that's something that's in our roadmap and not something that's just going to happen right away, but that's definitely in our roadmap, and we are exploring the option for including fingerprint authentication for Vault to work. Okay, so Atish wants to know about something. I'm just going to read out the question. So Atish has asked this: does an SSO make a single point of failure? That is, if someone guesses our passphrase or a master password, won't they get access to all of the credentials? So Atish, well, to answer your question, right now Zoho Vault works in a fashion where you'll first have to authenticate with Zoho. So you'll have to log in to your Zoho account, and if you have enabled two-factor authentication, you'll then have to validate your second factor of authentication. We support MFA with Zoho Vault. You can enable or enforce that for all your users. And once you're done, you'll then have to enter the master password to access Vault. So there's 3 layers of protection for your Vault. So it's not just about one master password getting compromised. So users will have to, attackers would have to actually bypass 3 layers of security. But the question's valid one. Uh, but again, right now with Zoho Vault, you will have multiple layers of security enabled. So it isn't as straightforward as it seems. Christopher, do you want to add any points to that?
No, Hari, it is all clear. The answer you said, it is correct. And it is also, tough for someone to easily guess the passphrase or master password of the user. So we generally have some restrictions for creating master password. So by default, we say we have to set up something that is minimum of 8 characters. But now recently we have implemented an option where the super administrator of Zoho Vault can configure a password policy or a policy for master password or passphrase. So we can also tighten the length as well as complexity of the passphrase, which will also, give some tough for someone who is trying to predict or guess the master password of an user account in the enterprise system.
All right, thank you so much for that, Christopher. I'll move on to the next question. Okay, Jerry wants to know. Okay, Jerry is currently using another password manager, and he wants to know if he can move all of his data to Zoho Vault. Yes, Jerry, you can very well migrate your data from another password manager as well. Let me just see if I'm reading the question right. If I wanted to change over to Vault, is there a way I can load all the sites? So, okay, Jerry, as far as I understand, I guess you want to know if you can migrate from a different password manager to Zoho Vault. If that's your question, you can very well do so. You can export your data from your existing password manager and import them to Vault, and you can very well, uh, download a browser extension and launch all these passwords that you have saved with Zoho Vault. So using a browser extension, you can access different websites. You can auto log into different websites as well as autofill passwords on different websites as well. So even you can download our mobile apps or our iPad apps as well, and you can autofill passwords across different mobile applications and websites as well. So we've got it all covered. We offer quite a comprehensive package for you to manage your passwords with just Zoho Vault. You can definitely autofill and auto log into different websites and applications with Vault. Yes, Paul. I think I answered your question with along with the previous explanation. So once your user authenticates with the identity provider, they'll be able to access all these different applications very easily. They wouldn't have to manually authenticate every single time. It's just a one-time thing. So once they validate or authenticate with the identity provider, which will be Zoho Vault, and as long as the session stays active, you can just allow your users to access these different applications without the need for manual authentication. So it's going to be a one-time thing. You'll have to set up SSO for every single application that you're going to use, but it's not going to be consuming a lot of time. Once you have all the necessary details in place, which should be easily available across different vendors' websites, you can just request them for the data that you need to update in Zoho Vault, and you should probably be done with setting up SSO in under 5 to 10 minutes per application. So yeah, it's probably going to save you a lot of time in the longer run. So you should definitely give it a go. Yes, Delisa, you can try Zoho One as and when required. There's going to be no restrictions on that. Okay, I'm just going to quickly shift to the previous screen because some of you guys want access to the resources that I spoke about. Let me just quickly switch to the previous screen here. Just 1 second. Yeah. Christopher, would you be able to send these links to these guys? Can you try sending these links directly in the chat section? Okay, Delisa wants to know what happens when you share a password with an outsider or a third party. Uh, uh, there might be times when you would want to share a password with a third party, right? You probably employ a freelancer at your organization, and let's say you want to share a password with them temporarily. Delisa wants to know what happens if the third party user ends up saving these passwords in their browser, or let's say they just remember this password and try to exploit things. So, Delisa, we have a separate section in Vault called reports. Under reports, you get to track every password that is being shared with a third party user in your organization. So we give you detailed access to all the list of passwords that have been shared with outsiders, as well as list out the email addresses of the outsiders who have access to your particular passwords under these under the reports section. So from reports, you'll be able to see which passwords have already been shared with outsiders and which passwords are currently active. So if this password if this password's validity or the period for which you wanted the other person to access the password has expired, you can very well reset the password. We give you a prompt to reset these passwords within Vault. So when you access this report section, you'll have a clear picture of all the passwords that need to be reset. So right now we help you in that way. We're trying to come up with a better way where you'll just be able to send a link to the third party user and they'll not be able to view your username or password, but rather just access the account. So that's something that we're working on, and it isn't something that's gonna come out very soon, but yeah, we're working on improving that. But for now, if you're looking for a workaround, you can always track the different passwords that are getting shared with third parties, as well as you can also set up alerts whenever certain actions get triggered from Zoho Vault. So you can you can just turn on alerts in such a way that whenever your users share a password with third parties, you can get uh, alerted whenever that action happens via email or through in-product notifications as well. So these are options that can help you keep an eye on all the password sharing actions going on in your enterprise. So it should keep you covered pretty much. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Anthony, I guess I answered a similar question earlier. So again, when you set up SSO, it doesn't mean that you're going to completely go passwordless. You're definitely going to have to go you're definitely going to have to take an approach where you combine password based authentication with passwordless authentication, because it's inevitable to see a world where everything is passwordless, right? Like, we're aspiring to achieve that, but that's not something that can happen right away. So as much as possible, you would want to migrate to passwordless authentication, because when you reduce the number of applications or the number of passwords someone has to remember, that'll be a major boost. Because a major failure that we see is people not recollecting passwords, which prompts them for a password reset, or they set very weak passwords that can easily be exploited, or they end up reusing one single password everywhere, right? So that's where Vault comes into the picture. You can set a strong password uh, for whichever accounts that you manage using passwords. You can just generate very strong passwords. So Vault generates passwords with up to 99 characters. So you can use these passwords and set strong passwords for different applications. and that is something that's going to help your account, right? Like, you are going to increase the strength of your account and prevent any password based threats from your end. But even if the password gets exposed from the other person's end, it does not mean the end of the world for you. You can always you can always manage your access to that particular account as and when required. Yes, Audrey, you can always import Google passwords from your Google browser. You can follow simple steps by exporting the passwords that are saved in your browser, and once you export them, you should definitely be able to upload your passwords to Zoho Vault. We have a separate option to import passwords from different browsers. Google Chrome is one of the options as well, so you should definitely try this out. Masingle, yes, you can download a browser extension. It's pretty much similar to what our competitors offer. You can auto launch a website and autofill credentials across different websites as well. You can also try to autofill passwords, and you can also save passwords of new signups on most of these websites. So yeah, go give it a try. You should definitely be uh, you should definitely get excited. Okay, we've got a few more questions. Okay, Christopher, can you take up this question from Rahil? Rahil wants to know how they can enable passwordless authentication for multiple accounts of a single website. So they want to know how they can set up. Uh, let's take Google. They quote the Gmail example here. They say they have 10 Gmail IDs of their clients, and they want to set up SSO for 10 different IDs. Is this something that you can help? I mean, is this something that Vault can help them achieve?
No, it is not possible. So when we say single sign-on, it means, like we ask the users to log in one time, and once they log into the identity provider or Zoho Vault, they can access any resource without having to enter the credentials again and again. So that is single sign-on. So in this case, what we do is when a user log into Zoho Vault, when he access any third-party application configured by superadmin, so user will be logging into those third-party application with the currently logged in Zoho account. So if this is going to be, 10 Gmail IDs of clients, which means the username and password. So the username will be a different username, which is provided by the client. So which will be completely different from the currently logged in Zoho account. So we cannot configure a single sign-on for a shared account or common passwords. So we can do single sign-on only for the resources that you access with your own account.
Thank you for Thank you for answering that, Christopher. I have another question for you, where Paul wants to know if the session's validity, the identity provider's session validity, depends on Zoho Vault session or the Zoho session, the Zoho One login. They want to know if they'll have to customize their Zoho Vault settings as well.
All right. So I can see, some frequent questions from Paul in this session. So let me explain a few important points, so which may clarify this query for Paul and others who have joined this session. So Paul, so when we configure single sign-on, like there will be three components basically. So the first component will be the user. Second component will be the identity provider, which is Zoho Vault, where authentication happens for user. And third component will be your target service, for which you wanted to configure the passwordless sign-in. So once we configure the SAML-based integration between the service, for example, let us say G Suite or Google Workspace, and the identity provider is Zoho Vault. When user try to access, like the G Suite application, so there are two ways user can access that particular service. Either they can access directly visiting the Google website. So when they visit Google website, when they try to click the login option, they will be redirected to Zoho. So they will complete the authentication with Zoho, and then they will be redirected to the G Suite service. So for single sign-on, it is not required to enter the Vault passphrase. So Vault passphrase is required only when you visit the Vault website and then launch the application through Vault. So when you are directly accessing the service, the passphrase is not required. You just need to authenticate with Zoho. So here the session considered is not the Zoho Vault session, it is your Zoho account session. So which is your Zoho 1 session. So I believe I've answered your question. So if in case if you have any queries, please post it in the question.
Thank you so much, Christopher. I'm just going to take up Delisa's follow-up question. So Delisa, I can see that you have concerns related to passwords getting saved in the browser. So what I was trying to say was, whenever you share a password to another user who's also part of Zoho Vault, you can revoke their access instantly. You can ensure that uh, they do not gain access unnecessarily in the future. If you don't want them to, let's say you have an employee leaving your company, you can revoke access to all passwords they had access to, and that's something that's very straightforward. But when you're sharing a password with a third party user who's not part of your Zoho Vault organization, you the current mechanism that we follow is that we give them 30 minutes access to the credential that you share. So after 30 minutes they'll not be able to access the link that contains the password, but when the user accesses that particular password, they'll be able to view it in plain text. But we'll also keep a track of all passwords that have been shared with third parties, and when we list out reports that give you insights on all the passwords that have been shared with third parties. So let's say you share the Twitter credential with a third party user who's promoting your social media activities. We'll share the Twitter password with them for 30 minutes. Once that is done, you will be able to find out the list of passwords that need to be reset under third party reports in our reports tab. So we encourage users to keep an eye on that particular section and manually reset all passwords that have been shared with these third party users. For now, we're coming up with a better way in the future, but right now that's the only thing that we suggest as a workaround at this moment. If you want to know more about how Zoho Vault works, you can always take a look at this product demo link that I've attached here. So you can feel free to take a look at how Zoho Vault works on the whole. But if you need a personalized demo session, you can always write to our support team. You can write an email to support@zohovault.com, and we'll be able to schedule a separate demo session just for you, so that we kind of get detailed detailed requirements from your end, and we'll also be able to replicate that particular thing. We'll be able to replicate the settings that you might need for your organization to function well. Okay, so not every password that you share with users get saved in the browser. When you install Zoho Vault's browser extension, it overrides your browser's password saving mechanism. So by default, whenever you log into a new website that's not already saved in Zoho Vault, Vault prompts users to save that password to their account in Zoho Vault. So you get a tiny pop-up to the right side of your screen that says, "Hey, you seem to have logged into a new website, and we don't really recognize these credentials in Vault. Do you want to save this?" So when your users install Zoho Vault's browser extension, or whenever your users access Zoho Vault's browser extension, they'll not be able to save the password directly to the browser. And we also have this feature called one-click login only privilege. So when you share a password to another user with one-click login only privilege, they'll only be able to log into a particular account and never see the password that's associated with the account in from Zoho Vault's interface. So they'll only have access to the account and not to that particular password. So this is something that addresses this issue as well.
So I see a request from KB Massingle in the questions. So there are a couple of questions. So one of them is, does this require use of browser extension? No, it is not required. The browser extension is primarily used to autofill credentials when you access websites. For single sign-on, it is not required to have the browser extension or use the browser extension. So you can log into Vault website and launch the third-party application or the website, or you can visit the website directly, log into your Zoho account, and continue accessing the particular service. And second question is about any experience with those who might concurrently use LastPass. So when it comes to single sign-on pattern for any service in place, you can configure only one identity provider. So if you were previously using LastPass as an identity provider for such service, and you wanted to use Zoho Vault, then you have to replace LastPass with Zoho Vault as an identity provider there. So there will not be any conflict uh, in this kind of single sign-on setup. And Paul, as you mentioned, yes. So if we wanted to do single sign-on, we also need to, configure Zoho Vault as an identity provider in the service. So only then the service can redirect every authentication request to Vault.
And just to address Delisa's questions,
Yeah.
yeah, can you, Christopher, can you take it up? Or I think, if possible, can you personally address her queries? Because I think it'll be better if you can address it, so that she can sort things out from her end as well.
Yeah, definitely. If in, so Delisa's query is about a password that is shared to external user. Somehow, that password has been stored in the user's browser. So this scenario, it is, something that happens not only when shared with external users. This also happens, even in, a standard browser. So when you share a password with view or modify or manage rights, that particular user can view the username password details in the product. So when they view the username, they copy and paste the username and password details to login on the given website. So when they try to log in, automatically the browser's inbuilt password manager will prompt you to save the particular password. So this is possible when someone logging in manually or copy paste the credential from the vault. So if they store they will get the prompt from the browser to save those passwords. And once it is saved, browser will also suggest to autofill those passwords when they visit such website. So to avoid these kind of issues wherein if we do not want the freelancers or external users do not have access to any passwords you share to them through Zoho Vault. So we must share those passwords with one-click login only privilege. So when we share with one-click login only privilege, we do not reveal the password information in our interface. So only option for the freelancer is to auto login to that particular resource using the Zoho Vault browser extension. When they install the Zoho Vault browser extension, it will automatically disable the browser's password store. So the browser cannot store any new passwords when the extension is installed. So if this answer still didn't answer your question, Delisa, you can drop an email to support@zohovault.com. So we shall further discuss this scenario and we can assist you further.
Yeah, I just noticed that she's also dropped a request to help us. I mean, let her move to Zoho 1. So yeah, I think we can take it forward from there so that we can assist her personally as well. I hope that kind of answers your question for now, Delisa. Okay, I still see that you have a couple of issues, but no worries, we'll be in touch with you. I just came across your support request as well. So no worries, we'll be in touch with you and we'll help you address your issue. But for now, we have run out of time. So if you guys have any last questions, feel free to post them. Or if not, you can always get in touch with us by contacting support at zohovault.com. Or if you'd like to know all the latest updates from Zoho Vault, you can always follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at Zoho Vault. Thank you so much, guys, for taking some time to join this session. I hope this session was very informative for you, and this, kind of prompts you to try passwordless authentication for your enterprise. If there's anything else you would like for us to help you with, you can always feel free to drop an email to support, or you can just send us a DM on Twitter. We'll be helping you out very well. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining today, and thank you so much, Christopher, for accompanying me today. We'll definitely meet you guys in another webinar next month. Thank you.